各位观众朋友们，大家好，欢迎收看 JxJ 论坛，由我 Jimmy 妈妈见我们的好朋友 Jim Noteware 为我们去讨论这个礼拜的时事。Jim, it's good to see you.
Good afternoon, Jimmy. Great to see you. Glad to be back here.
There are many things that happened this week that's on our mind, but I want to hear about your week. You mentioned earlier that you had a very busy past 3 weeks. Could you share a little bit of what happened in the last 3 weeks?
Sure. I'm involved in a number of real estate projects and development projects where we acquire land and develop certain types of products. Some of them are low-income projects, affordable housing through the tax credit program. Some of them are a new single-family rental concept, and some of them are master plan communities. But life has, for the last year and a half, I think most people realize anything to do with the residential markets, real estate generally or residential, has been very volatile. Construction costs have been going up significantly and consistently. Each individual cost item, line item goes up and down, but in the main, they've been in aggregate going up. And then for a very long time, starting about a year and a half ago and going until about 6 months ago, we had terrible supply chain problems. Some of them had to do with the national and international supply chain, like importing from Japan. Some of them had to do with local factors, like inadequate capacity at local lumber mills, all of them. But it just has wreaked havoc everywhere. And as soon as that began to moderate about 6 months ago and get some stability on the volatility, costs kept going up. And then the Federal Reserve decided to get tough on inflation.
Yeah.
So the consequence of that, which needed to happen a long time ago at a smaller dose, but given that they waited and they waited and they waited, and then they became so abrupt that the cost of financing has gone way up. It's not just on single-family mortgages that people want to take out when they buy or refinance or buy another home. It's the cost in the whole financial system that's going up, and with it, a reduction in liquidity. So financing is getting more expensive, less available, and the terms are getting much more difficult. So what's happening is a lot of projects are dropping out, perfectly understandable. And because of that, a lot of things are getting delayed, they're getting changed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in many ways, life is getting more difficult, including for some of the things I'm doing. But in other ways, that difficulty is creating other opportunities. For instance, everything I've just mentioned leads to the fact that land should be losing value, and it is, which means that some owners of land are getting more eager to sell. Some are even approaching desperation, which then makes things more favorable for a guy like me. Okay, so it's a mixed bag, but this is like taking a little rowboat out into a very stormy sea, because there's a lot of cross currents, a lot of changing winds. The navigation at night you can't see because there's too many clouds, so you can't see the stars. All the analogies fit very well. And this is, in my career, 50 years, this is the fourth major change, major recession slash depression that I've been through. The causes of all of them are very different, including this one. Most people in the real estate world don't yet believe that we're in difficult times. But anybody who's trying to get anything done today, like a new construction bid or a new financing, life is getting much more difficult. The other thing that's happening is many commercial tenants, residential not so much, but many commercial tenants, retailers, office building users, etc., are really pulling back. really pulling back. And you can see the headlines in the paper every day about major corporations announcing major layoffs. Retailers are offering sales, etc. And interestingly, now to come full circle to answer your question, sitting here 6 to 12 months ago, everybody in the construction business was extremely busy, and you had major delays just because you couldn't get contractor attention. They couldn't get appropriate labor. But now people are calling us and saying, gee, do you have any new projects? Do you have any new projects? I'm seeing advertising for plumbers and roofers, etc. And so there's an old adage that everything is slow until they change. And when they change fast. Okay.
Perfect analogy, what you said.
I'm sure you see it in the stock market too.
I can't believe people in real estate don't believe that we're going into a retraction period. Us on Wall Street knew long ago on the show, you could see it, pull it up, that last year when we're talking about it in the fourth quarter to get out of the market. You knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. But there's some projects that the wheels are already in motion, right? And you have to keep going. You really can't stop. But you're right. You withstood 4 different recessions, and each is different. But you cannot never mitigate all the risk. It's a macro and microeconomic issue, like the analogy about in a storm. There's a lot of pitfalls. That's why not everyone could do this. You have to have a lot of patience and a lot of how do I say this? Cojones. You have to be ballsy to be able to.
Well, you do, and part of having cojones is having the strength to take a position and then hold to it. You have to learn. You have to learn how to say no, and you have to learn to know when to proceed, when to take prudent risks. There's nothing risk free, and I talk to other people in our business that, particularly the ones that I respect. Frankly, I don't like to spend a lot of time or conversation with people that I don't respect, but leave that aside. But most people notice, and it comes up immediately in conversation, a change in attitudes across the broad public.
Regarding
attitudes about people, particularly young people. Maybe not wanting to work quite so hard. The number of people who say they're out of the labor force, other people don't want to come in. I mean, there are legitimate labor shortages, but there are also, and there's double talk in the system. My wife has a great saying, well, if you have a shortage, the best thing to do is pay more. And then that supply will be induced. And I think there is a great deal to that. A lot of corporations are saying we don't have enough workers, or we can't find the right workers with the right skills. Well, if you increased your compensation, not just in dollars, but in working conditions and in benefits and all of those things, and you treated people better, you would have a better chance at getting things and rebuilding your cultures, which admittedly have been fractured because of all the work from home and everything that's occurred during the pandemic. But at the same time, there does seem to be a change in attitude. And the other thing we all notice is the government's attitude is they say they want to help everybody, but most everything is more restrictive, more sluggish, more expensive. You come close to dealing with a government, and it is getting harder and harder and harder to do. And I'm talking everything from federal government to local governments. I mean, local governments now, again, my perspective in the real estate industry, are every bit as difficult to get entitlements on housing, or get the local government to finance infrastructure, or to do all the things to support their growth, or do simple things like getting permits processed. It's as bad now as it's ever been. And everybody says, oh, we're encountering a housing crisis. I mean, it's a pretty famous thing. As soon as Mr. Biden was inaugurated, the first thing he did was increase the tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber. What's the biggest ingredient in houses? Softwood lumber, okay, 2x4s. So why are we protecting our lumber mills and foresters at the expense of the broad populace? What do we have against the Canadian forests? Canada's our best friend in the world. I just don't get it. I can understand, I don't agree with it, but I can understand putting tariffs on steel being imported from China and some other places around the world. But softwood lumber, when you're saying we have a housing crisis, come on.
Isn't it an environmental issue is to protect losing more natural habitat? No? I'm asking.
That's what they say. But I find that it's Americans who say that to justify the increased tariffs, and what they're really trying to do, or what they're really saying, is they're protecting Canadian forests. But what I find interesting is the Canadians are happy to cut them down and ship the lumber to us. Okay, so there's so much double talk in the system, which is another dimension.
These are the folks that are being called the inner city liberals, or the West Coast, East Coast elites. That
right. When I was a kid, we called them limousine liberals. Yeah.
You don't know, but they don't know they cannot connect with the reality of what the industry needs or what people want. So it goes back down to how politics now and governance have gone down to pandering to their supporters, their base, the extremism.
Yeah.
And there's no more common sense or moderation. And elections coming up, Jim. So go out there and vote, and folks, go register. You have till the 11th of October to register if you haven't, and in order to vote in the November elections.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming up soon, guys. So please try to. It takes literally 2 minutes. Go online, see, put in your info, your birthday. This is public service. We're just telling people to do it. No one told us to do it. You gotta vote.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The only thing I'd add to what you say is do your homework. Be conscious of who you're voting for and why. Be conscious of what's at stake.
Jim, I understand what you're saying, and it's absolutely true. But this is the problem. Most middle-class Americans do not have the time or the know-how of where to get information to research, to learn about candidates and the policies. There's too much going on. Now, no one's going to vote straight party tickets anymore. I don't think. I hope nobody does that. But even for me, it's overwhelming. Luckily, I have friends and I'm involved in some things. I could probably send you guys information on candidates from both houses, or the ones that I do know personally. But like I said, it is a lot of information. It is a lot of races. It's very hard. We're not talking about just a congressman or the governor race, right? We're not just talking about that. We're talking about all the elections, local elections that really does affect your daily life, and those are the elections that does matter.
Yeah, they do. Things like school board seats.
County judge, appeals court,
and the judges, criminal courts, civil courts, those positions make a huge amount of difference. And look what's happening right now as a consequence of I'll call it misbehavior or lack of caring. Look at the surge in violent crime because people are getting let out of jail. Many of them don't even have to post bond anymore.
Jim, it's funny you brought this up. I was at a board meeting yesterday, and one of our board members is a current federal prosecutor. He is actually very conservative. Mm-hmm. And exactly what he said was brought up during the endorsement process. And this is what he said that addresses it better than anybody I've heard, because he sees it from both sides. The issue with this bond is that before, a judge will be able to set a bond for specific crime, okay? Mm-hmm. But that leads to a lot of perceived unfair bond amounts, because for normal folks, $1,000 bond means we pay $100. Everyone can just get out of jail. But from a lot of folks that are from low income, especially after the pandemic, they don't have the $100, so they end up sitting in jail. So the jails get overcrowded. And the worst of all, a lot of them will plead guilty or no contest just so they could get out of jail. Nobody wants to sit in jail. for a small offense. So it's disproportionately not fair to lower income. So the solution, what they did, the feds and the state, what they did was they changed it to not, the bond is not payable to individual crime. It's a set amount. If you have a misdemeanor, your bond's this much. If you have a felony or first degree, second degree, the bond is the same for everyone. Herein lies the problem. Then violent offenders or people that could repeat, or you see in headlines, right? Oh, they're out on bond and commit another crime. Mm-hmm. Well, they're out on bond because it's either one size fit all, or you cannot choose both. So that for their crime, their bond's the same as everybody else's. That's the only way to be fair. Well, they get out and they commit crime again. So either way, there's really, I mean, it's very hard to come together because they both have their point. There's a reason why we're here. Now, we could also blame. To me, I use the word blame because you could say one party's in the court system. That's why these judges elected, pander to criminals. That is not true either because they're also following. They don't set the law. The legislators do. They can only interpret, or when they're just judges. Mm-hmm. So what you said about the bond and criminals and overcrowding and rehabilitate, the federal prosecutor said every judge is different. But to him, when you're a judge, you're not here to rehabilitate or to find a counseling or solution to make sure this person charged will get better. The judge is there to interpret the law and to sentence the offender appropriately according to the law. Mm-hmm. So it's very hard to do both because that's what they want. They want you to be an advocate for mental health or for problems, right? Because a lot of these offenders do have that. But either way, it's catch-22. But I do understand what you're saying. We have children. We want our children to grow up in a safer environment. We don't want to have crime because of crime. But I think this is not a political party problem. It's bipartisan. I think it's above that. I think it's a whole.
No, you're right.
Do you serve the community? The community wants this offender in jail, but the judge has to think about the rights of this particular offender versus the community. Community wants it, but for this person, his rights is, according to the law, is that he's supposed to be out on bond because his offense is a particular offense. Does that make sense? Do you serve the community or serve his rights, personal rights?
Yes, it does. And I think the public sector itself, the management of the judicial system has failed as well. Nobody ever talks about this. We need to have more courts so that we can have speedier trials. So the whole issue of people being out on bond shrinks. Because if you're not going to get to a trial for a year, nobody who hasn't been convicted of anything should sit in jail. But if you're talking about 2 weeks, 4 weeks, that's a little bit different story. And I mean, here in Harris County, it's famous for not having rebuilt its courthouse after the flood in 2017. I mean, we just simply don't have enough courtrooms. And you say, oh, the jails are overcrowded. I hate to say it. It's a terrible comment on our society, but maybe we need to build more jails because the objective is to get the bad guy off the street so he doesn't commit the crimes again and again and again. And so
I think law and order, everybody wants law and order, but at the extent of whether a community could rehabilitate this person, whether they have a chance to be integrated into society, because you don't want a bunch of hardened criminals, because jail is not conducive to making people change. Well, anyways, this is a story that we could talk for hours about this. I'll tell you one thing right now.
We can talk about it, and a lot of other people are talking about it for their entire careers. So.
But I can tell you, our church, our pastor is able to go into the unit here in Richmond, because I don't know if people know that here in Houston, in Southwest Houston, over there by Fort Bend, we have a lot of state penitentiaries there, multiple units,
Yeah.
So our church is able to go in there. Our pastor is able to go in there and talk to the inmates, and it's very fruitful because he tells us that people do change, people do find faith and get better. Give them a chance. Now, not all offenders, right? We're not talking about all offenders. Some. I got to give them a chance.
I wish they would take that message out to many of the high schools and other places where young males congregate so that they could spread the word that it's not a wise thing to get yourself convicted and go into prison.
Jim, this is key. When you're growing up, we knew that you're accountable for your actions, and that whether you're scared or respect law enforcement officers, you should be. But now, because of social media, I'm not saying all of it. I'm very fearful. I see these false shooting, mass shooting, calling it and saying this. This just happened in Fort Bend County a few days ago at a Fort Bend County fair. Some kids start screaming, running around saying there's a shooter. There's a mass panic. People were injured. Why will people do these things? 40 years ago, 30 years ago, I can't imagine me doing that when I was 15. Or the actual mass shootings. Did you know that in Harris County, in Houston area alone, this last year, there are multiple instances of teachers, educators being assaulted by students?
Yeah, I've heard that.
No, this isn't the news. This is ridiculous.
Ridiculous. Now you come back. What do you do with the kid that assaults a teacher?
But the problem is this, Jim, then the advocates would say, I'm not saying they're wrong or right, but they'll say, well, we don't know what's going on at home, what happened to him. Maybe he's being abused. Maybe there's no parents. Maybe there's some psychological issues that we need to deal with. He's a kid.
All of that can be true. All of that can be true.
But do we put that kid in jail so we could stem this violence?
Maybe. You have to figure out what motivated him in that action, or whether it's going to be repeated or not. And anyway, everything is very complex. Life is far more complex now than it was a generation.
Do you feel like every generation says that?
Well, probably, and in a way, because it is.
Technology and
just think back over 200 years or so. Think of the difference in communication. Even
20 years ago, you know about 200 years ago. 20 years ago, nobody had cell phones.
And think about the expectations that come along with that, and think about what people call multitasking because of that. And the pressures that come with that. The direct pressures, the indirect pressures, all these other things. And it's a worldwide phenomenon. I think some countries of the world have the issues more than we do here in the United States. And even in the United States, it varies from place to place and group to group and all it. But overall, I think most people would say life is much more complicated. Just dealing with the IRS is far more complicated than
that's absolutely true. I
think almost everyone would say that. Almost everyone would say that. So,
well, Jim, here's to a complex life that we will try to make simpler. To me, I appreciate simplicity now. I really do.
Yeah, I do too. I do. I like simple. And when I tell that to other people, I say that's something we can agree on.
Well, it takes age and experience to understand how simple is better, because we've been there and done it before. You want to know. So I appreciate your time. I hope you have a simple week this week. I hope you have a lot of simplicity. And
life is going to be simple for me for the next 3 weeks. I put my wife on a plane to Europe.
She's got daughter.
What's going on over there? Well, she's going to see our daughter in London, but she's going on a bicycle ride throughout Germany.
Wow.
And so it's a perfect time of year to do it, the fall.
Beautiful weather and just gorgeous. Well, that gives you 3 weeks to work on, put in extra work and enjoy the solitude.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll try to stay out of trouble. It's sometimes hard, but I'll try.
Now, before we go, I want to pray for our Floridians that are.
Yes, very good idea. Very good.
Let's close our eyes and.
Yeah.
You gonna do that, please? I'm taping right now. You know that. Amen.
Yes, we know what that feels like here in Houston.
Yeah, exactly.
And believe it or not, I didn't think anything could be worse than Harvey. But I think what Orlando is going through, what Fort Myers went through yesterday, is worse, and Jacksonville's going to get it tomorrow.
It's so bad. I mean, these storms are getting worse and worse. And we have to believe in global warming and the effects of human climate. This is 100-year storms. It's just bad. But look, besides all this, we pray for them. Let's hope we can help them. I'm sure there'll be a lot of efforts, relief efforts coming up soon.
And thankfully, we have an organization called FEMA and some of the other places that do offer help. And we have a great ethic in this country of called first responders and people helping each other, volunteers. We really, really do. That's something in this country that never changes.
I see pictures circulating of thousands of linemen in their trucks ready to go.
Yeah, I saw a picture of it.
And that's
that's phenomenal.
That's America. That is about as American as it gets.
That's the high note to end on this evening, Jimmy. Thank you.
Have a great week, my friend.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good.